So that's the RV industry's answer. Your expectations are just too high.
Are you contemplating upgrading your RV? Or are you thinking of joining the millions of others enjoying this RV lifestyle?
You might be thinking you'll buy an older, more affordable RV and then just make it your own.
And that could be a good plan. We just want to make sure that you know what you're getting yourself into before you make the leap.
Today we're going to run through the good, the bad, and the ugly of buying a new, used, or vintage RV and help you figure out which is best for you.
On this episode of Roaming with Rosie. Hey Roamers, I'm Jamie.
I'm Linda. This is Dexter.
And this is Roaming with Rosie.
So what's our experiences with buying RVs? We've bought a few.
Initially we had an older Terry, which was like a 1978 Terry trailer, single axle, built like a tank, so it was really heavy. And then we had one of those trailers that looks like a trailer, but on the front and the back it pops out like a tent trailer, and we bought that brand new.
And it was a piece of garbage.
It was a piece of junk. It was falling apart. And then after that, we bought Rosie 1.
Rosie 1 was a 2001 Holiday Rambler Ambassador. We renovated the whole thing.
Yeah, and we have videos, and we'll put links down in the description for the renovation videos.
Because it was an old RV, we decided we wanted to have an inspection. First, we had another coach inspected at the dealership.
When you looked at it, it looked beautiful. We had the inspector run through it. They have a special light that can look for roof leaks and things like that. And after inspecting the rig, the guy basically told me I wouldn't suggest buying the rig. And then I happened to find original Rosie on RV Trader.
We had the inspection. The problem was the owner was reluctant to either bring it to or let us bring it to a place where we could hook it up, an RV park nearby. He wanted no part of that. So we should have had suspicions at that point. We went ahead and had the inspections.
Well, there's a couple different types of inspections. There's the one that we did where they basically inspect the entire coach.
The house portion.
The house portion of the RV. Make sure all the slides work, the air conditioner works, your refrigerator, all those things. And then within that inspection, you can also have them do what's called a fluids test, where they'll take samples of the fluids, send it back, and have them analyzed to make sure there's no issues as far as the transmission and the oil and stuff like that.
So the different types of inspection
are the one that we did. The other inspection you could get, you would have to actually take the RV to a reputable company that looks at, RVs as far as the motors and things like that, the undercarriage and all that kind of stuff. We did a trip and we came back and I noticed there was fluid leaking from the radiator. And it turns out what it was, the gentleman who owned the RV prior to us had some service work done on it at Cummins, and Cummins suggested that he had the radiator either repaired or had it pulled out and inspected to see if it could be repaired or if it needed to be replaced. He opted not to do that, and basically...
What did he do instead?
He epoxied it. And what ended up happening was, because it was in the summertime and we did this trip, the epoxy failed. And when we got back, we could see the leak. That was one thing that the inspector, when they did the inspection, they're supposed to go through your paperwork. They actually missed a sheet where it said that he opted out not to do the radiator work. Had we known that, we would have had second thoughts.
For a large diesel pusher, the work to have it done plus a new radiator amounted to a cost of about $5,000. Now we had, as long as they were taking the radiator out.
It just makes sense to change these things out now, some belts and things like that, since we have it out.
Soon after, figured out that the motor size was not the size that we'd been told.
We were just outside of Mexican Hat, an area called Valley of the Gods. If you're continuing north into Utah, there's a grade that's like, I think, 9%. And I was about 80% up that grade, and the RV was down to like 10 miles an hour. And in my head, I'm going, I hope I don't have to back down this hill. Luckily, the RV kept going and we made it up the hill, but it made me think in my head, if we're going to tow a small vehicle behind us, it's never going to happen with this RV.
In the meantime, we had started all the renovations on the interior, so we went ahead and completed that. As Jamie said, we'll link that video below. Turned out gorgeous, but she wasn't the right RV for us. We sold her. It was heartbreaking. Before we even finished renovating her, Jamie saw Rosie 2.
Right.
And his heart was immediately into it.
I was always kind of looking at Alfa Sias because they were kind of unique. They were a different type of RV. You see them on the road, and it has really good bones, but it also has old bones. So that what that means is over time, things are going to wear out.
Why didn't we purchase newer at the time? Because we had a budget, and it was really important to us to stick to that budget. Not really thinking about how much of our monthly budget was going to be spent on that constant chasing of upkeep.
We've had a few things where we've had a slide not open, not close when we went to close it, and we had to have that repaired. We've had to have an airline replaced because one of the airbags was leaking, so we had to pay for that to have that done. Recently we've had our leveling system kind of go quirky on us, and we had it into the shop, and then good luck trying to find that part because of how old it is, and
it's a really big issue.
And the companies that makes that part is no longer in business, so you can't get the part anymore. So those are things you want to take into consideration.
Things are going to constantly be wearing out, and so that's a decision that we knew we would be into, but we didn't know what that would really feel like.
We could have spent double on a newer coach. No, we haven't spent that much in repairs yet. But as you're going through it and traveling and dealing with the frustrations of that, it does take a toll on you when you're driving down the road and wondering, okay, I just fixed that. What's this noise? What's going to happen next?
So next, in new versus old, will a warranty keep you from having all of these issues, or at least protect you from the cost of these issues?
There's the original warranty that comes with the coach when you initially purchase it, and I think that's like 1 to 3 years, I believe. And then there's a warranty if you're buying a slightly used coach, you're covering the whole coach or whatnot. And then there's warranties you can get for older coaches depending on how old it is, how many miles on it. When we bought original Rosie, we could not get a warranty for it because of the age. When we bought this RV, I called them. They were willing to do what's called a drivetrain warranty, which covers the motor, the transmission, a lot of the suspension parts and things of that nature. Now, the one thing that they would not cover is the coach part of the RV. The living part of the coach is what they would call that. As long as you're within the miles and the age period, you could get one that would cover the whole coach part of it and also the drivetrain.
For a motorhome.
For a motorhome. Now, remember, we spent $5,000 to have the radiator replaced in the old RV. When I found out how much the warranties were to cover this drivetrain and everything, was kind of a no-brainer. It was basically $3,800, and it covers us for 3 years. If something was to happen major, it's going to be paid for, and we don't have to worry about it.
So what else do you need to know before choosing used versus new RV? Well, first we probably need to talk about financing. How are you going to pay for it? One of the most important things to consider if you're buying a new RV is the depreciation along with that loan. So could you end up upside down on that loan, and you might not even like RVing?
Right.
And RV loans, I've seen RV loans for 20 years.
Right, yeah.
So you think about how long they're extending that payment out there. So your first year or so, you're not paying it down as rapidly as it's depreciating.
If you purchase a coach that's say, or an RV that's say a couple years old, a good percentage of that depreciation has already happened. It's already,
right.
They've already taken the hit on that.
An RV, like a car, like most cars, is not an investment. Even if it's going to be your home, it's not going to value the same way as your home. Your home, hopefully, will continue over time to go up in value.
A car or an RV or boats or things of that nature typically go down in value the longer you own them.
Buying a new RV doesn't mean you're going to have a problem-free RV life. Steve Lito, a consumer protection attorney who's handled his share of lawsuits against the RV industry, has had people tell him that they've purchased a brand new RV, driven it off the lot in a rainstorm, it begins to leak, and they had to hire him to solve the problem. So you know what the industry's response to that is?
An industry spokesperson said that 50% of the people purchasing RVs are first-time RV buyers, and a lot of those buyers look at it as if they're buying a car, so they believe that their expectations are really high.
Yeah, so that's the RV industry's answer. Your expectations are just too high.
One prime example, one of our followers, a gentleman, he actually camped right near us when we were out in Quartzsite, and he had a brand new, I'm not going to tell you what make it was, but he had a brand new fifth wheel. He said, hey, I'd like you to come and walk through just to kind of show you what I've found with this thing. There was actually, cabinetry falling apart, and he'd only owned the thing for like 6 months. Doors not opening properly. When I compare it to original Rosie and then also the coach we currently have, when I look at the cabinetry and the doors and all that, they're more like what you would find in a regular home. When I go into a lot of the newer RVs, when you open a door or whatever, it almost feels like, balsa wood, like the little airplanes you would buy and put together and throw in the air. And if you threw it too hard, it would break. And that's kind of what I see when I'm looking at cabinetries and things like that in the newer RVs. Now, one caveat to that is some of the newer technology as far as the outer skins and things like that in the RV can be a lot lighter, so it's easier to tow, and it could be better than some of the older stuff that they used on the outer part of the coaches. But I think for the most part, older RVs were built a little bit more like tanks. They were a little more heavy duty and sturdy, and they weren't built quite as fast. There wasn't the huge production push that there has been within the last, I say, 10 years.
So it would seem that you're buying this really expensive vehicle, right? And that the government would somehow make sure that it was like a car, that it had a lot of inspection that took place. Nope, that's not what happens at all. The government is concerned that the RV you're buying is up to the safety standards that are set for it, and that's about it. So what can they do? RV manufacturers can have themselves monitored by joining RVIA, and that is RV Industry Association. They pay very high dues every year to belong to it. Inspectors can show up at the plant where the RVs are being built and check you out and make sure that you're holding to the standards that are agreed upon within the association. So for the past 15 years, the RV industry, like a lot of other industries, has had a lot of ups and downs. Starting with the recession, 2007, 2008, a lot of RV manufacturers went out of business.
One of them, prime example, Alfa. Alfa in 2008 was the last year Alfas were made.
Following shortly after that, RVs started booming and the business started booming, and the manufacturers literally began whipping them out. And so that leads to some problems right there where they're not assembled correctly.
And that's obviously part of what, like I told you, that gentleman that was in Quartzsite pulled it off the lot, and there's doors not closing and things falling off of the wall, and the thing's not even a year old. So that leads me to believe that because they're self-regulating themselves, this is the end product.
And we're kind of back to that right now. But in between, we had the pandemic. The manufacturers were shut down, and I don't think they were closed very long because a lot of people got the idea, RV life sounds good. I can take my house with me, my house on wheels, and I can be in the outdoors.
RV companies talking about record amount of RVs produced in a year. I think 2020, 21 were, I think, 420,000 to 500,000 units that year were actually built.
And there's also now a shortage of parts. So you had first tariffs. A lot of parts were coming from China.
Right.
Tariffs put a different spin on that. And at that point, RV manufacturers started looking around and saying, well, what else can we use?
You got to remember, these manufacturers are trying to make money, so they're looking to see where they can still get a product done, but also cut costs and make as much money as they can putting that product out.
Ultimately, what you need to look for is, are the RV manufacturers building something that you're going to be happy with for as long as your loan is, possibly? Or are they just building shiny boxes that look pretty when you drive them off the lot?
Yep, right.
Everything we're talking about here with new RVs, at least most likely would be covered by your initial warranty. But if you're buying a used RV, how do you know what you're actually getting?
One way to protect yourself is, like we said, have a certified inspector inspect the entire rig.
The top 3 things that they usually will look for and hopefully don't find are, the first one is a leaky roof. If you've got a roof leak, depending on where it is and how long has it been that way, and is there mold underneath it, and is it repairable, The other thing that you're going to find, or hopefully not find, but depending on how old, is electrical issues. And the other issue, which we've already had, is slide problems.
Yep.
Luckily for us, when that slide went out and it needed a new slide motor, it was only our little slide, and he had to crank it in. So now that you've decided that you love that used coach or trailer that you just found, and you're going to accept the things that are wrong with it, and you've hopefully tried to figure out how much it's going to cost you to repair those things, maybe your inspector helped you with some of that information, can you find somebody to fix it?
When we had our coach in recently to have the levelers looked at, I called a couple of places and they asked me what the year of the coach was, and they said, we don't work on anything older than 10 years old. Are you going to be able to find somebody that'll actually work on the coach?
If you're buying an RV and you're planning to live in it, that's something to think about, because we had to wait a week for the first thing. Then we got home and discovered that there was another problem with the leveling system. We had to wait a week to bring it in again. Where are you going to go during all that time? So that was the reason that we chose to keep a home base. These are things that are going to happen, and you've got to know where are you going to go while you're waiting for your RV to be fixed. So you've been all excited about doing a renovation. You follow social media. You've seen all the really cute renovated RVs. You have all kinds of pictures you've saved from Pinterest, and you've got the skills to do this DIY project. You still got to realize there's a lot more to an RV than just the aesthetic look of the inside and the outside.
There's also the underlying issues of things that are going to go over time because parts just wear out, you know, like slide motors and things of that nature.
So now you're thinking, oh, well, maybe I should just buy a new RV. So right now, currently, in 2022, if you buy a new RV and you have things that go wrong with it, you're probably going to wait a while before those things get fixed. We've seen cases where people waited with a brand new coach for months.
You know, we talked about how they put out like 500,000 units. Now dealerships have to deal with warranty issues with that, maintenance issues with that. As far as certified RV technicians, I think there's like, what, 13,000 in the United States?
13,000 certified technicians. There just aren't enough people to work on your RV. And then you have the next problem of, was your RV manufactured in shoddy condition? Was there flaws that really can't be remedied? Even if it is covered under a lemon law, then your next problem is establishing, now what do you do?
We have a couple of links that we can put down in the description where you can actually do research to find, number one, do they have a lemon law in the state that you live? And then number two, the process of going through to actually remedy the situation.
So now you're thinking, okay, how about slightly used? The term in the industry is shakedown period. So you want to buy one that's already gone through its shakedown period.
If you get one that's a couple years old, they've probably gone through and all of the problems that were done during manufacturing have been remedied and fixed and dealt with.
Maybe.
Maybe.
Could it have been returned? And was it repaired, or did they just turn around and resell it? All they have to do is claim that they're selling it as is. If they know what's wrong with it, they're supposed to declare it. That's another thing to consider. Why did somebody turn an RV in after only 1 year? Right now, we're on the cusp of overhauling Rosie 2 here.
Yeah, and we're about to spend, you know, thousands of dollars doing the renovation on the inside and possibly the exterior.
And after that, we still might be dealing with big ticket items that are bound to still wear out.
Yeah, so again, we're glad that we decided to keep a home base where we're able to park the RV, which also gives us the availability to do the renovation, and then also if there's any issues as far as the RV mechanically, we can have those done and have a place to stay while those things are being repaired.
Right now is a good time to be looking at buying RVs. They're going down in price and they're not selling fast at all.
Things have kind of reversed themselves. Now I think the buyer's more in the driver's seat as far as RVs.
So we hope we've given you some things to think about here, and that we've helped you make the right decision for your circumstances. You'll find links down in this video's description for more information on what we talked about, as well as products and equipment we use and recommend. We sometimes do receive a small commission when you use our links for purchases, which is a great way at no additional cost to you to help offset some of our production costs. Thank you so much for watching and sharing our videos and subscribing to Roaming with Rosie. We'd love to hear from you and encourage your comments and questions. Until next time, see ya!